shocking event suddenly appeared and shook the atmosphere. In just minutes, news spread that Jungkook's mother made an emotional call to V, or Kim Taehyung, in tears. This information created extraordinary commotion among fans because there has not been a single clear explanation regarding what actually prompted the call. How could a figure who has always kept her family's privacy strictly suddenly become the spotlight through a private conversation leaked to the public? Does the crying indicate a serious problem that has been hidden, or rather an urgent plea for help that could no longer be postponed? This shocking news developed very quickly, forcing the public to hold their breath. Big questions immediately arose. Why V, not another figure within Jungkook's closest circle, was contacted? Is there something that could only be entrusted to Taehyung? This question immediately triggered wild speculation, since the relationship between Jungkook's family and other BTS members has rarely been exposed to the public sphere. The fact that Jungkook's mother chose to call V in this emotional situation raised suspicions of a special bond rarely spoken of. Small signs circulating on social media further strengthened the tense atmosphere. Some anonymous accounts mentioned that the tone of voice in the call sounded full of pressure, as if there was a heavy burden that could not be borne alone. The public wondered, what is really happening behind the scenes? Is this related to Jungkook's current condition, either emotionally or professionally? Or does it involve issues larger and more complicated than just internal relations? A narrative appeared that cannot be ignored. If a mother called her child's friend in tears, it means the problem had already gone beyond the normal limit. This situation was not merely a form of ordinary communication, but a signal that there was something urgent, something that could not be left waiting. What was also surprising was the timing of the call, which was said to have occurred only several minutes before the news began to spread. The speed of the leaked information raised a new question: who spread this fact, and for what purpose? The involvement of V's name made the intensity of this issue even bigger. V is not just Jungkook's groupmate. He is a figure who has always been in the public spotlight because of his closeness to many circles. If this emotional call really happened, then clearly there was a symbolic message in it. Why should Taehyung hear those tears and not another member? Is there something in the relationship between Taehyung and Jungkook that the public has not realized, but was instead revealed through this incident? Amidst this uncertainty, fans' emotions mixed. Some felt pity, some suspicious, some even angry because such private information spread widely without clarification. But herein lies the sharpest problem. Was this leak deliberately made to create chaos, or was there truly a source who actually knew the real situation behind the call? This question became harder to answer when the narrative fragments that spread sounded so detailed, as if someone had really witnessed or even directly heard the event. A mother's emotional reaction is certainly not something trivial. The crying recorded in this conversation portrayed a heavy psychological burden, perhaps related to the pressure Jungkook faces as a global figure. Not a few speculated that the call was a form of plea for help, some kind of last signal to ensure someone would still stand by Jungkook in the middle of a storm unseen by the public. But if that was true, why was the public the first to know, and not those more authorized in the closest circle? The shock grew when some fans tried connecting this event with previous moments. Some recalled how Jungkook once appeared gloomy in several instances. Others highlighted V's expressions that sometimes looked serious and burdened, as if these small fragments began forming a bigger picture, even though not a single piece could be confirmed true. Was Jungkook's mother's call the peak of accumulated issues long concealed? Questions kept emerging, and the deeper it was explored, the harder it became to find certain answers. Here lies the tension of this news. The public is forced to guess, analyze, and connect various circulating signs. Whether the call was real or not, emotional or exaggerated, it still left a significant psychological mark among fans. How could a private call change so many perceptions in such a short time? The situation became even more complicated because until this moment, no explanation has calmed the public. Everyone only relies on the circulating fragments. Some said the conversation was short, others said quite long. Some claimed to hear specific words, others only mentioned faint crying. These different versions actually made the atmosphere more intense, as if there was a layer of truth deliberately hidden. Whatever really happened, one thing is certain: The news about Jungkook's mother calling V in tears has caused a major shock. The public felt left hanging between believing and doubting. But what cannot be denied is the emotional impact already felt by many. This situation created a big dilemma. Should we wait for clearer answers, or bravely admit that not all questions can immediately find their answers? The commotion born from the news of Jungkook's mother calling V in tears demands us to pause and ask carefully, did this event really happen as told? Or is it just a narrative construction deliberately created to stir public emotion? Are we witnessing a reality truly worth worrying about? Or are we trapped in an information trap full of emotional manipulation? These questions are important because in today's digital era, the line between fact and sensation is so thin and often deliberately blurred for certain interests. Why could news so personal allegedly spread so fast and create global reaction in just minutes? Who first leaked this information, and for what purpose? Did certain parties deliberately shape small fragments of conversation into a dramatic narrative so the public would be trapped in controversy? If so, aren't we actually being played by media strategies relying on sensation rather than accuracy? The sources of information we have must also be examined more critically. Much of this narrative circulated through platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and some other channels that often lack strict verification standards. How could we immediately accept this news as absolute truth without tracing its origin and context? Is there really an authentic recording of the conversation, or just wild interpretations magnified by social media algorithms? If we are not careful, aren't we contributing to spreading potential hoaxes that harm many? We must remember that every viral narrative always has a certain emotional appeal deliberately emphasized. In this case, a mother's tears were used as a symbol of suffering and dramatic anxiety. Yet the fundamental question still arises. Do we really have trustworthy proof that the call happened? Or are we merely following the current of discussion formed by fragments of story without clear verification? Isn't it very dangerous if the public ties their emotions to something not necessarily real? The impact of such news is clearly not simple. Excessive emotional reactions of fans could trigger a domino effect difficult to control. They could feel hurt, disappointed, or even angry without clear reason just because they believed information still vague. Is this what the parties who first spread the news wanted? If indeed there was motive behind spreading this information, shouldn't we be more cautious and refuse to become tools for sensationalism? Let us reflect more deeply. What is the main purpose of such news? To deliver facts or merely to increase public attention? If the answer is the latter, then we are facing a serious manipulation practice. Isn't it ironic if fans who love their idols so much are instead used as test subjects to measure how far news can affect their emotions? Are we willing to be continuously played this way? Furthermore, we must highlight how social media creates fertile ground for uncontrolled speculation. Every piece of information can quickly be turned into a big theory, confusing the public. In such a situation, can the public still distinguish between mere opinion and what is truly based on real evidence? Aren't we trapped in an information circle that allows lies to grow and develop as if they were truth? If this event is true, then clearly something very serious is happening behind the scenes. But if all this turns out to be engineered, shouldn't we question who benefits from this panic? Are certain parties exploiting public empathy to expand their influence? Doesn't such practice reflect the dark side of the modern entertainment industry that often relies on drama instead of substance? Readers must also be invited to weigh the psychological impact of news with unclear truth. Isn't it too cruel if an issue not necessarily true is allowed to affect the mood of millions of fans? Do we want to be part of the group that spreads baseless anxiety? Or, on the contrary, dare to take a skeptical stance and demand concrete evidence before being trapped in hysteria? We must also consider the long-term consequences of the public's attitude being too easily convinced by sensational news. If today we easily believe a narrative not yet verified, what guarantee is there that tomorrow we won't fall into a similar trap? Isn't this an important lesson that skepticism is not a sign of indifference, but rather a higher form of concern for truth? The biggest question we must ask ourselves is, are we truly ready to accept that this event might never have happened at all? Are we ready to face the reality that a mother's emotional crying so vividly described was merely part of a scenario designed to test how big public reaction could be? If that is true, shouldn't we be angry for being used by those wanting profit from mass panic? But on the other hand, what if this news really is true? Are we ready to bear the moral consequences of our skepticism? Doesn't this create a deeper dilemma between believing in something that might be true or rejecting something that actually is real? Here lies the greatest tension, the public forced between two poles, belief and disbelief. Without clear certainty, in the end, everything returns to a basic question. Do we want to be passive spectators of a drama staged before our eyes, or critical readers brave enough to demand truth? Do we want to remain in the cycle of information manipulation, or choose the harder but more honorable path, namely deep skepticism? With all these questions, it is clear that what we need is not only clarification, but also reflection. Reflection to evaluate ourselves. To what extent we allow our emotions to be played by narratives not necessarily true. Reflection to ask, are we still able to distinguish truth from lies amidst the flood of information? Reflection to reaffirm that the greatest responsibility of a reader is not to believe, but to verify. Yet, one thing worth underlining is how the public often falls into patterns of instant information consumption. When dramatic news appears, many react immediately without weighing the evidence. Doesn't this show how fragile our media literacy foundation is? Shouldn't every reader restrain themselves, ask questions, and verify sources before drowning in hysteria? If not, aren't we the same as machines that only respond, never think? This phenomenon also opens wider discussion. Why are issues involving big names like Jungkook and Taehyung so easily made objects of sensation? Is it because their popularity is too big to avoid, or because media know well that any news about them will instantly gain extraordinary attention? Doesn't this affirm that the public itself contributes to perpetuating shallow news consumption, since demand for drama is always higher than fact? Here arises an ethical dilemma that cannot be ignored. If a private issue is exploited merely for clicks, views, or popularity, isn't that a violation of human boundaries? What if a mother's crying is truly real, but treated as mass spectacle without considering the emotional wounds it causes? Are we willing to see human suffering turned into commodity just to satisfy public thirst for sensation? We must also question the motives behind those spreading this narrative. If the information really came from accounts on TikTok, YouTube, or Twitter, shouldn't we ask what their purpose is? Do they truly care about Jungkook's condition, or are they just seeking profit from the chaos created? Isn't it very dangerous if public concern for their beloved figure is exploited for shallow interests? Furthermore, let us consider the impact on public perception of Jungkook and his family. Couldn't such news tarnish their image, even without clear evidence? What if the news turns out untrue? Who will take responsibility for the reputational damage already done? Doesn't this show that in the information era, reputations can be destroyed in minutes, while recovery takes years? Not stopping there, this event must also make us ask, can we still distinguish between genuine empathy and empathy directed by media narrative? Is our pity truly born of concern for Jungkook and his family, or merely the result of emotional manipulation by those controlling the storyline? If even our empathy can be manipulated, doesn't that show how fragile our position is as consumers of information? This reflection becomes even more important when realizing that not everything seen on screen truly reflects reality. What we hear, what we read, could be fragments of reality already modified. Isn't this a harsh warning that the public must not only be passive viewers, but must actively criticize every piece of information? Otherwise, we will be continuously played by stories deliberately shaped for certain purposes. The final question we must ponder together is, how should we respond to this news? Should we simply believe it, or reject it completely? Or should we choose the wiser stance, suspend judgment, while demanding concrete evidence before drawing conclusions? Isn't this the time for the public to show that they are not mere consumers of information, but guardians of truth, critical and not easily deceived? Thus, this case is not only about whether Jungkook's mother really called V in tears or not, but also becomes a mirror of how we treat information in the digital era. Will we continue letting ourselves be ruled by sensation, or dare to go against the current with skepticism, reflection, and criticism? The decision lies entirely in readers' hands, and perhaps this is the greatest test, not only for the figure who is the subject of the news, but also for the public consuming it raw.